But it's a real pleasure for me to introduce Fred. He and I have been friends for a long time, and nobody does their work better than Fred, and nobody does more to change this world than Fred. And with that, here comes Fred. And this will be a panel discussion, and Fred, you tell us how to behave.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Julian. That was amazing. Wish my mother had been here to hear it. The truth is that Julian Robertson's commitment not only to the Robertson Scholars, but to education reform, medical research, to environmental issues, is changing the world. And I wish there were more people in the world committed to have an impact with their philanthropy as Julian is with the Robertson Foundation. So Julian, thank you for that, and thank you, Aaron Stern and Wyndham, for serving with Julian on the Robertson Foundation board. Sandy. You've all seen the images, the great avenues of New York, dark and flooded, the businesses and homes, lives destroyed, elderly people trapped in their apartments without heat or light for days, images of young children pulled from the arms of their parents by that awful surge of water. When I was growing up in New Jersey, we thought natural disasters were things that happened to other people. But the world is changing. The strength and the impact of this storm were not random. The water surged higher because the seas are higher. Hurricanes are getting stronger because more heat puts more energy into the storm, and warm air holds more moisture. Now, it's common to say that these things are unpredictable, but the likelihood of stronger, more destructive storms is entirely predictable. Scientists have said this is exactly what happens when we slowly cook the planet. Now, we don't know precisely when the next superstorm will strike, but we know with each passing year, the intensity of the storms will get stronger and stronger. The 1980s were the hottest decade on record until the 1990s, which were hotter, until the 2000s, which were hotter still. And while this was happening, the scientists at Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii, who in 1950 measured 315 parts per million of carbon dioxide, in the last decade measured 390 parts per million of carbon dioxide plus. And the warming can build on itself. For example, the Arctic permafrost is beginning to melt. Why do we care about that? Because melting permafrost can release lots of methane. So the warmer it gets, the more permafrost melts, the more methane is released, the warmer it gets. Hurricane Sandy woke people up to the reality that global warming affects real people. And you don't have to live in New York to care. Today I met Minhaz Islam from Bangladesh. 90% of his country is less than 10 meters above sea level. A country with over 150 million people, many of whom are impoverished, many of whom have already died because of flooding caused by storms. And the harsh truth is, things are getting worse. Now, before you decide to give up and go into corporate law or renounce having children, I'm here to tell you tonight that I think we can fix this. I think we can bend the curve and change the outcome. There's 3 reasons why I'm optimistic and hopeful that we can solve this problem. And I don't think this is wishful thinking, like that people with SUVs are going to suddenly trade in their SUVs for a bicycle. But facts that are as hard as concrete that explain why, if we are smart, we can solve global warming. We can get ourselves out of this jam. The first of the 3 reasons is we have not tried capitalism yet. Capitalism built our civilizations. It's given us dazzling technology that many of us have in our pockets. It's increased our life expectancy. It's raised our standards of living beyond what our forebears could ever have imagined. It's easily a force potent enough to solve climate change. But right now, the incentives are all in favor of polluting because it's profitable to pollute. Society as a whole, taxpayers, pay for the impact of pollution from private sources. What if we realigned those incentives so that when you burn fuel, the price of that fuel reflected the full cost of pollution? And then let the market search for the lowest cost, lowest polluting sources. What if we offered a reward for those inventors and entrepreneurs that figured out a way to soak CO2 out of our skies? Now, across the globe, many countries are beginning to get the incentives right. More than 25% of our planet is moving in this direction. The European Union has put caps and prices on carbon and limited our greenhouse gas emission. So has Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and the world's 9th largest economy, California. Brazil has actually reduced deforestation and the carbon dioxide emissions that go with it by more than 70%. 20 years ago, saving forests in Brazil was way outside of the mainstream. Today, it's the Brazilian equivalent of mom and apple pie. China is moving to reduce the growth of emissions. 250 million people in China now live in areas that are creating demonstration cap-and-trade emissions systems for greenhouse gases. You heard me right. The Chinese communists have decided to use capitalism to solve the world's most pressing environmental problem. They get the power of capitalism. Even in the United States, we have the first ever rules to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from new power plants. And we are lowering the emissions from cars. This is not enough, but it's a start. The second reason that I'm hopeful is found right here at home. We can and we are changing our energy system. Renewables and energy efficiency have the potential to reduce our emissions substantially. States are improving their building standards, companies are conducting energy audits, and new technologies are coming online every day. Moreover, we're collectively realizing that the cheapest and cleanest form of energy is the energy that we don't have to produce because energy efficiency has made it unnecessary. But there's a bigger change in our energy mix as well, the change that Julian mentioned, fracking, that controversial, complicated, hot-button issue. It's here to stay. But if we do it right, it could have a positive impact. Now I know that's a big if, but natural gas has the potential to be much cleaner than our past fossil fuel sources. And as natural gas production has soared in our country, the amount of coal that we're using to produce electricity has dropped by 25% from 2004. The development of renewable energy is also moving quickly. In fact, there are parts of this country where wind power is now cheaper than coal. Let me take an additional moment to talk about fracking and natural gas in a little more detail. When natural gas burns, it produces about 50% as much carbon as burning coal. That means these new technologies that allow shale gas to escape from the shale could cut in half America's electricity impact from those plants that now burn coal if they switch to natural gas. But there are two big problems. One, fracking is a very industrialized process, and so there are the impacts of that industrialization on the communities: air pollution, potential for water pollution, the need for disclosure of what chemicals are being used, the community impacts of truck traffic and noise, and waste disposal. The other problem is that natural gas is composed mostly of methane. Now, when I was talking about permafrost and the methane that's released, the reason that methane has the potential to warm the globe, and is warming the globe, is because over the first 20 years from the time it's released, it's 70 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So any gas that escapes anywhere from our natural gas system, from the drill head to the pipeline to your home, has the potential to undermine the advantage of natural gas and to cause us to be really set back in our war against global warming. In fact, if more than 3% of the natural gas escapes the system, it completely undermines the advantage of switching from coal to natural gas for the first few decades after making the switch. I don't know about you, but what I love is a problem we can fix. And this leaks of methane from pipes, unlike some of those complicated political problems, this is a problem we can fix. In the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we've seen data that 66% of the leaks come from just 10% of the wells. We can close those leaks. This is perhaps the least sexy, most important work that's going on, and I'm excited that this afternoon I spent my time 3 hours with 16 Robertson scholars that are investigating, exploring the possibility of making a difference by closing these methane leaks in our city's distribution systems around the country. Because every time they capture 1 ton of methane, it's like convincing 3 owners of a full-size pickup truck to switch to a Prius. Now, I dare you to find one owner of a pickup truck to switch to a Prius. So this has a big impact. The third reason to be hopeful about climate change is that for all the political polarization that has existed about the issue, we are seeing the very early signs of an emerging consensus. Respected Republican leaders like Governor Kasich in Ohio and Governor Christie in New Jersey, and business people like Rupert Murdoch have publicly endorsed the science of climate change, even if they differ with environmental activists over what the solution is. But I understand in this great debate about climate change, it's natural to ask, can any one of us make a difference? And the answer is no. Not if you limit yourself to hand-wringing about how awful it's going to be. But if you actually decide to get out there and do something about it, like those Robertson scholars that we were meeting with this afternoon, working on the fugitive methane emissions, you can make a real difference. Because every ton of greenhouse gases you prevent through energy efficiency, through an audit, through a scientific innovation, through state-level limits, or from some idea you have, some path you create, can push back the climate tipping point. I'd like to close by recalling another image that you've all seen many times. This small, vibrantly colored globe in the midst of black nothingness. The one spot in the vastness of the universe where all life we know of thrives. Some people believe that that photo gave birth to the modern environmental movement. But what always catches my eye when I look at that photo is the thinness of the atmosphere. The towering blue sky above us, relative to the Earth, is just a barely perceptible sliver. A small protective bubble, a layer of air in which all the lives that we live takes place. A layer of air that has existed in natural balance for eons. A layer of protection which our pollution is now destabilizing. The work ahead of us could not be more important, and those of you who choose to pursue it have my gratitude and my admiration. I believe this is the calling of your generation. Thank you.